We're going to move forward with our interview. A couple of questions first. Your firm was asked not to review the interviews that preceded you. Can you confirm to the best of your knowledge your firm did not view those interviews?
Yes, we can confirm.
Very good, thank you. So we have 35 minutes allotted for each interview. The timer will initially be set for 10 minutes, and you'll provide your introduction. Once the 10 minutes has elapsed, or when you completed your introduction, if sooner, the timer will be reset for 25 minutes, at which time we'll ask the interview questions. All firms will be asked the same questions, but there may be follow-up questions based upon your responses. I see that you have a PowerPoint presentation the staff has ready to put up for us. So with that being given, the 10 minutes is yours for your introduction. Begin whenever you're ready.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. My name is Susan Lemke, and also on the phone are my colleagues Josh Wilson and John Mason. We very much appreciate the opportunity to meet with you today and discuss Mercer's response to CalPERS RFP. If we can flip to page 2, thank you. Mercer has an 81-year history and more than 28,000 clients and $4.5 billion in annual revenue. Our investment management practice has $250 billion in assets under management and $11 trillion in assets under advisement. The last few months have been tumultuous in the United States and around the world. In our offices and in our work, Mercer serves the fundamental principles of human dignity, equality, community, and mutual respect. This commitment comes from both our employees as well as from our leadership. And Mercer's commitment to our people and our communities has made me proud to work at Mercer. Christine, if you could flip to page 3, we further introduce our key personnel for this review. Again, I'm Susan Lemke. I'm a subject matter expert in public pension and endowment compensation programs. And I sit in our Seattle office, although right now I'm sitting in my home in Woodinville, Washington, as we're all working remotely. I lead our public pension survey, which is sponsored by the University of California, and in which CalPERS participates, and we always appreciate that participation. I also lead our endowment and foundation compensation survey, which covers more than 100 of the largest foundations and educational endowments in the country. I regularly advise boards on compensation and governance issues. Josh Wilson and John Mason will serve as the day-to-day account leads for our work with CalPERS. Josh and John are both located in our Atlanta office, where Josh is the office leader. They both lead board-level engagements for both private and public sector clients and work with a number of institutional investor clients. Also on our team is Jessica Portis, who is a U.S. not-for-profit consulting services leader for Mercer's investment management practice. Unfortunately, Jess wasn't able to join us today due to a travel conflict, but she will serve as an investment subject matter expert for the project as needed. Our team has worked with SBA Florida, Employees Retirement System of Georgia, CalPERS, and recently was selected by the Washington State Investment Board. In total, we've worked with about 11 public pension funds. We also work with many large universities like University of California, Texas, Princeton, Duke. We also work with very large foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Getty Trust, and Moore Foundation, among many others. Now I'm going to ask Josh to tell you a little bit more about Mercer.
Thank you. If we can go to the next slide, Christina. Terrific. So Mercer is part of the Marsh & McLennan family, or MMC as we call it. MMC has about 75,000 people globally, revenues of about $17 billion. The company was founded in 1870, and Mercer became part of MMC in 1959. So after 70 or so years, we feel like we've worked out the kinks. MMC itself is divided into 4 divisions, 2 in risk and insurance, that's Marsh and Guy Carpenter, and 2 in consulting, Oliver Wyman, which is a strategy consulting firm, and Mercer, which is a full-service human resources consulting firm. In preparing for this interview, we looked at your mission statement, and it reads, deliver retirement and healthcare benefits to members and their beneficiaries. But that was interesting because Mercer's mission statement is actually very similar. Ours reads, making a difference in the health, wealth, and careers of 120 million people every day. And that's how we're organized at Mercer, health, wealth, and career. Our health group, which I'm proud to say has done work at CalPERS for over 15 years, helps companies design, administer, and maximize the value of healthcare plans for employees and their beneficiaries. Our wealth group, which has also done work with CalPERS for years. It's comprised of our retirement consulting business and our investments business. Our investments business actively manages our clients' defined benefits and defined contribution assets. Our colleague, Jess Portis, is part of that group. And the final leg of the stool is the career business, and that's the business we used to call human capital. That's the business that Susan, John, and I sit in. In addition to compensation consulting, this business handles performance management, succession planning, career paths, surveys, communication, HR transformation, and our workday practice. I think at this point, it's worth taking a moment to answer a question that you haven't asked yet, but you probably will, and that's the question of our independence. Independence, particularly around executive and investment compensation, is an important issue and one that we take very seriously. Mercer established our global business standards for executive rewards consulting a number of years ago, and we revise them periodically. We'll provide a copy of these standards to CalPERS after this meeting. Essentially, in order to manage any potential conflict, the standard addresses three areas. First, our reporting relationship with our clients. Second, our QA process. And third, compensation. And it specifies that our performance and rewards of our compensation consultants are evaluated and determined within our own line of business rather than across lines of business to avoid any conflict of interest. So this multi-service dynamic exists in many of our clients, public and private. For instance, we support the Florida State Board of Administration's compensation subcommittee, while our Mercer investments team has a relationship as the investment advisor, and this has never presented a conflict for us. Again, I will provide these standards to you after this meeting. We can go to the next slide, please.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. One of the questions we were asked to opine on is how we view our role if we were lucky enough to be selected as your advisor. And we have been lucky enough to be selected as an advisor to some of the nation's top institutional investors, which we're very proud of. As we thought about the question, it occurs to us that there's been a trend of a widening of scope, if you will, of what was the Legacy Compensation Committee to cover more of a comprehensive talent agenda. Our role is that of a trusted advisor who can simply answer the questions you have as a committee across the human capital continuum. We understand that the expected scope is largely compensation focused, but it's really important to make sure you avoid making compensation decisions without first considering the broader lens of human capital considerations and implications. We're compensation experts first. We have best-in-class data, a laundry list of top clients in the space, but we're more than that. We have expertise that extends beyond compensation. We're very fortunate, as I said, to consult with the boards and committees of some of the nation's top institutional investors, and through our 20,000 global colleagues, we bring to bear expertise in areas such as employee listening, succession planning, performance management, and pay equity. In addition to this, by collaborating with our investments colleagues, we're able to ensure that your incentive programs have not only been vetted by an independent compensation expert, but also vetted by an independent investment expert, which we view as very important. From our perspective, CalPERS has decided to name this committee the Performance Compensation Talent Committee, and no doubt that was an intentional decision. We believe that we're the best firm to advise you across these topics. Josh, I'm going to hand it back over to you for the following slide.
Sure, we can go to slide 6. Terrific, and this will be our last slide. I doubt that we have a totally different mousetrap from our competitors. I'm sure you're talking to top firms in this space, and all of them are very good at what they do. What makes us feel uniquely situated to work with CalPERS is a combination of qualifications that are on this page, playing in concert to give CalPERS the best outcome. And really, it starts with the team. And in the end, if I were in your shoes, this would be the biggest factor in my decision. Does this team, the one that we're presenting, have the expertise, the diversity, the experience, the breadth, the capacity, and the resources to partner with CalPERS and take you where you want to go? We have assembled the best Mercer has to offer, from Seattle to St. Louis to Atlanta. We have experience on the compensation side and the investment side. The length of our current relationships with other clients should give you a good indication of the value they are receiving. They feel that we are proactive and that we bring innovation to them on a regular basis. Mercer believes in the total rewards approach. Compensation and benefits are contractual pieces. You have to get those right. Then it comes career. That's the piece where you can differentiate. And you need to have a mission or a purpose. That's the emotional piece. So when all three of those work together, which is actually what you have in your guiding principles, that's when it really comes together. Engagement scores are high and results are better. Mercer has a lot of data. There's no question about that. We have more surveys than I can count. And frankly, you probably won't use most of them. But the ones that we have that are very important to us are the Endowment and Foundation Survey, the large and leading compensation survey, a pension compensation survey, executive surveys, and financial surveys. And those surveys will help inform us to give the best advice we can. And we'll also use data that you already have, such as McLaughlin. You're hiring consultants to give you advice, but the surveys will help us make sure that our advice is also data-driven. I want to be conscious of time, and I think we've mentioned the other ones, but we do a lot of work in other spaces as well, and that's going to help us. And with that, we're welcome to take any questions.
Very good, thank you. So our first question is, based on your response to Section 7 of Attachment F, Proposal Questionnaire, in the RFP, the firm indicated you would require deviations to CalPERS standard contract terms and conditions. Please note that in no way is this an acceptance by CalPERS of any requested deviations from the terms and conditions. Can you please confirm your response for us?
Could you repeat that question? It cut out a little bit.
Based on your response to Section 7 of Attachment F, Proposal Questionnaire, in the RFP, your firm indicated you would require deviations to CalPERS standard contract terms and conditions. Please note that in no way is this an acceptance by CalPERS of any requested deviations from the terms and conditions. Can you please confirm your response for us?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Question 2, Ms. Ortega.
Thank you. Based on your knowledge of CalPERS, the Board of Administration and its Performance, Compensation, and Talent Management Committee, and our incentive compensation program, what actions would your firm take within the first 120 days if selected?
John, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just reading a note that I was getting an echo. Are you all hearing an echo from me? No?
Oh.
No. Sorry, I apologize, Ms. Ortega. Could you read that one more time? I got distracted.
Sure. Based on your knowledge of CalPERS, the Board of Administration and its Performance, Compensation, and Talent Management Committee, and our incentive compensation program, what actions would your firm take within the first 120 days if selected?
Yeah, very good question. I think, clearly better understanding your organization is key. So, we have gone in great detail, as you do a very good job being transparent on your website, of explaining your programs. And there's obviously significant detail on your programs and past practices. But we would like to speak with the committee, speak with management, and really understand what you're trying to achieve, right? Because everything is built on a foundation of your compensation, your rewards philosophy, right? So understanding what that is and helping understand and agree that we're in concert with what your rewards philosophy is. And then it's building from there. So it's helping assess your peer group. We understand that you have currently looking at about 5 different peer companies, or peer groups with different companies from different types of industries in them. So we would want to work through with you the rationale behind that. Does it make sense to continue to keep the 5 groups? Are there other groups that we should consider based on your philosophy? And it's really laying that foundational framework of why the decisions are made, I think, is the most important thing to do, probably even quicker than the first 120 days. Josh and Susan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would probably add is, we have to assume that what you've done, there's a good reason for it. And we would want to make sure we understand that. We don't want to come in and give you a different way of doing something that may not be better. We'd like to understand, because there's a lot of history of what's happened and how you got to where you got to. And so we want to understand that first. As we studied your programs, certainly there are areas that we looked at and said you could do it differently. It doesn't mean it's better. For example, the length of your LTI is 5 years. You could say, why not 3 years? But I think there's probably a good rationale for why 5 years, 3 years. And so I think the first step is understanding, and then looking at it through a new lens with perhaps some new data, but certainly some new eyes, and then going from there.
Thank you, Ms. Middleton. Ms. Middleton, for the next question.
Okay, thank you. What current compensation issues exist for public sector employers as related to incentive pay and highly compensated executive and investment management positions? And how might those issues impact CalPERS' ability to attract, hire, and retain high-quality executive and investment management team members?
Sure. Why don't I take first stab at that, and John and Susan, if there's something I miss or overlook, please jump in. I think public sector has a very difficult job to do because you expect the performance similar to what you would expect of a private money manager. Just because you're in the public sector does not mean you expect a lower return. You benchmark against accepted benchmarks, and you don't say we're okay to have 3 percentage points less than that. So what you're really expecting is top performance, but you're hamstrung by your ability to pay. So part of this is mission, right? So part of this is to ensure that the people who are there, almost every one of them could get more compensation in the private sector in some form or fashion. But they're there for a reason. So your mission is very important. But at the same time, they're not going to work for pennies on the dollar. You're going to have to make sure that you are adequately compensating them, not bridging the entire gap between what they could make and what you can pay. But this is an ongoing problem. And look, dollars are very hard to come by in the public sector, right? There's always somewhere else that money could be spent. And anywhere you do spend it, you will be questioned for it. But in this area is one of the areas where you can prove a direct result of performance. And that's why you can have incentives in asset management in public sectors, and you can't have it in other parts of state government because you can really prove performance. So, it's hard to get those dollars, but I think those dollars are important to attract and retain those top people, which is part of your guiding principles. And when you do that, you want to make sure that you have pay for performance plans that really meet sort of an every person standard, meaning if you outperform a benchmark, it's okay to pay an incentive. That incentive has to be reasonable, so there be guidelines for it. But generally, if you can prove performance, it's an easier case to pay what you have to pay to get the people you want to manage billions of dollars of capital.
Yeah, I mean, just quick add on to that. I mean, it's such an interesting dynamic and challenging dynamic where on the one hand, you have, white hot skills set in the investment space that's highly sought after by a number of organizations. And then you have the public scrutiny that comes around incentive pay, and bridging that gap can be really, really challenging. Josh and I have worked with a number of state pension funds where we actually designed and implemented their incentive plans, whereas before they had none. And that's it's a difficult road to travel, one that we've traveled several times. Really truly believe that incentive pay is critical for competitiveness as well as for motivation of investment in executive employees.
Very good, thanks. Go ahead, you something, Susan?
No, I completely agree with that. And I think at the Unique organization, we have a lot of experience working with unique organizations in the public sector. And in addition to the public pension funds that we work with, we also work with a lot of public universities who run into very similar issues. And so that's something that we focus on, helping tell a story.
Thank you. The next question is Ms. Oliver. Ms. Oliver?
Okay, sorry. There's some feedback happening, and I'm not able to fully hear everything.
I think muted.
The scope of services for this contract includes the provision of compensation-related educational sessions or workshops. If asked to provide this service one or more times during the course of the contract, what approach would you take to design a session And what key topics would be important to share with us during such a session?
Again, I'm happy to take first shot at this unless Susan or John's going to knock me off the podium.
Go ahead, Josh.
We've had this situation before, and frankly, we love it. It's a great opportunity to make sure that all the various stakeholders understand some of the psychology of compensation, the science of it, the art of it. I think it's a very important session. We designed these, and frankly, one of the things that we've started with has been the exact training that we use for our analysts. So when we hire new hires to Mercer out of college or out of any situation, whether they're 22 or 52, we put them through a pretty rigorous training. And so we start with that material as our basis, and then we'll obviously tailor it to the specific client. But making sure everyone is on the same page with terminology, with thought processes, for example, designing a peer group. Well, a question we get for peer group is we don't compete with them. Well, that's a different question, or they're not in the same industry as us, or types of questions like that. So how do you think through those types of issues? And frankly, we would love to be able to present and educate anyone on this topic because it makes our jobs better and it makes the outcomes much more likely to be successful if everyone's on the same topics. I think there's an added element in this of public compensation, right, and some of the dynamics of that. And what we could bring to that is our experience, as John mentioned, having created legislation for the state of Georgia in 2004 to get their incentive passed, having worked with the governor in Florida to get their incentive compensation passed. We understand, at the same time, having gotten stymied in North Carolina and not being able to get incentive compensation passed, we understand the pros and cons and would love to be able to work with people to make sure that we're on the same page.
Very good. Thank you. Next question is Ms. Middleton.
Right, thank you. Please describe your experience working with diverse boards or similar bodies which operate in public settings. What do you do to balance the needs of the board, the organization, and its members and beneficiaries when you develop and present recommendations?
Susan, you want to take first shot at that one?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it is part of what Josh talked about earlier of getting to know you up front, understanding how you work, who you are, your processes and the requirements that you need to work with. And we use that education to really customize our work to really meet your needs. One of my clients is University of California. They are notoriously challenging with their governance structure to try to have something changed. It's one of those jokes that if you want to change something, it will be 2 years from now. If you start now, maybe you can get it done that quickly. And so that's one of the things, a lot of education, a lot of working with you to make sure we are meeting your needs. Josh, I don't know anything more on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. When I first started in this business, I had a mentor, an old Southern gentleman who would say, if you surprise anyone at a comp committee meeting, you didn't do your job, right? And so what that meant was there is so much preparation that goes into it to make sure all the stakeholders have been included in the process ahead of time. And it becomes more, it's important in a for-profit, publicly traded company board. It's even more important in a situation with a public entity because there are so many different stakeholders with so many different points of view. When we worked with Florida, their sunshine laws were such that we could not have a conversation with more than one compensation committee member at a time. Otherwise, it was considered a meeting and it was public. So therefore, we had to have pre-meetings with all 16 of them. And so it was that kind of process. And we learned you can't do anything quickly. So if you're trying to push the deadline, that's a bad idea. You're going to have to push things back. And to the point Susan made, we started putting in the incentive plan in Florida in, I want to say, John, it was 2014, 2013. And I think it finally got implemented in 2017. But they have to. So
yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that I would add to those two statements is, I think the best way, like you mentioned, to address a diverse board is to start with a diverse team, which I think we've brought between the four of us on this team.
Very good, thank you. The next question, Ms. Olivares. You're muted, Stacy.
Sorry. Describe your experience developing incentive plan recommendations, which include qualitative and quantitative performance objectives, as well as shared organizational quantitative performance objectives. What key elements must be considered to create meaningful, measurable objectives?
John, you want to take first shot, or would you like me to?
Sure. Yeah, so we have extensive experience designing incentive plans across organizational types, from public pension plans to other institutional investors to, frankly, Fortune 500 publicly traded companies. I think, some of the tenets that are so critical is getting the balance between quantitative and qualitative right. Typically, what we see is sort of a pyramid approach where the higher jobs in the organization have more that are based on overall company financial and less on individual, and that cascades down to individuals down in the organization, where a larger component is individual. So they don't flex even, but within the organization on that split. It's absolutely critical that for both financial and non-financial measures, that you take every effort to make the measure measurable, right? A lot of times folks think that only the financials are measurable, but it's really trying to put the rigor around the non-financial metrics that oftentimes makes these successful. Josh and Susan, anything to add there?
And the only thing I would add is I think in the public sector environment, A, there's more scrutiny, and B, I think there's a heightened awareness of the financial side of things, the quantitative side. I mean, in the plans we've designed, and we've had this discussion, when we're not with clients, we sit around talking to each other about these things and saying, is qualitative better than quantitative? Do you drive behaviors? If you just measure quantitative, are you sort of going to promote behaviors that aren't great in the work setting but get you good results, et cetera? If you have, it has to be quantitative in the sense that you have to defend that decision to pay incentive pay to a variety of constituents. And if it was all qualitative, you couldn't really do that. That would be a very difficult situation. At the same time, if it's all quantitative, you have no levers to pull around behaviors and expectations and things that aren't measurable from a dollar perspective, like succession planning, training and development, recruiting, things like that are critical for the lifeblood of the organization, to keep the organization sustained for generations to come, which is really your mission. You're not playing the short game, you're playing the long game. So, I think you have to balance it. Is there a perfect answer in any situation? No. We tend to err on top executives is more on quantitative than qualitative, but making sure there's a sizable qualitative piece.
Yeah, I think the only other piece that I would add, as I think about it more, is also getting the split between total fund and asset classes correct. Right. So, what would be most often is for, let's say, for the head of alternative investments to have more incentive weighted towards their own asset class versus the head of fixed income. However, you also want sort of a total fund view. So it's getting that split right as well, I think, is important.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Question 7, Ms. Ortega.
As the board's independent consultant, how do you ensure independence yet maintain a collaborative working relationship with CalPERS management and/or team members?
Sure, I'll take that one, and I think I may have addressed some of that in our initial speech there. So, look, it's critical in any company we work with. It's become more critical over the years. Mercer has created these global business consulting standards for just that purpose. We work for the board. There's no question about that. We work for the board. Now, we have to, it's an effective relationship when we work with management as well. But everything is in the absolute daylight, and everything goes through the board or whatever process is designated by the board. Our standard practice is to send things to the client, in this case, the board first. If the client says, go ahead and send it to both management and me at the same time, that's what we would do. But really, our processes are such that we work for the board. We have the quality standards that I mentioned, and that's how we manage that.
Yeah, I mean, to add on to that, it is so important. It's also important that for any incentive plans that management's voice is heard, right? If you're going to be on an incentive plan, it's important to be bought into the process of how it was created. So we understand our reporting relationships, but it is important to keep a working relationship with management.
And I think also, it's the data, right? Because in the end, the recommendations that we're going to make are going to be largely based on data and our experience. And so having strong data, which we talked about earlier, is a big part of that. And, management's very educated and they see the same data that we see. And so having everything out in the open is helpful to all parties.
Very good. Thank you. I see a follow-up question from Ms. Ortega.
Yeah, this is related to some information that was provided in the presentation about, perhaps this is for Susan more directly, about the public pension survey and some of the collection of information you get across a large group of, whether it be the public pensions, universities, foundations. I was wondering if you have seen any efforts to look at engagement surveys and targeted specifically to executives. So I think we have seen some engagement information from CalPERS in the past, but it's definitely more aggregated information. And I just wondered about the kind of things you may have seen across the state and across the country in terms of looking at what executives are looking for in their engagement with an organization.
And is your question related to how you would measure engagement, perhaps in an incentive program, as far as individual performance?
Well, I'm thinking of it in terms of questions that come up around whether it be attrition or what it takes to make an organization a place where people want to be, the types of things that, reputation, being a great place to work, some of those types of things that come up when you may pull some of that out in engagement surveys.
Exactly. I mean, I'm a big believer in engagement surveys, and I think Josh and John would agree with that as well. I think it's important to have employees engaged. We've done a lot of research at Mercer saying that is really critical to organizational performance. And so I think, we often see when we look at healthcare as an example, you see kind of a balanced scorecard type of approach to measuring performance. And one of the things that is very frequently included there is engagement, both employee, looking at employee engagement along with patient satisfaction and other surveys. And so I think that we're going to see more of that creep into the investment space. We haven't seen that explicitly stated, although I will say I do work with some clients that they are very much taking that into consideration as they're looking at the, qualitative performance of their team. How much are they engaging their team? How much are they supporting the broader organization? Are they doing the things that need to be done to support the organization and have it be successful, both with their team members as well as publicly? So I think that to the point that I think that John mentioned earlier, where your committee has a broader name and a broader purpose, I think that that's a trend we're seeing as well, pushing through to executives.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add there is, I do think this is a differentiator for us in that we're a big player in the employee listening space. It's sort of the new jargon for what was engagement surveys is now employee listening, because there's tools where it's happening more frequently, right? Rather than just once a year, it's happening on a much more periodic basis. Technology is enabling us to get to more deeper insights quicker on that. But it is important to understand the different facets of your organization. Executives based on other diversity metrics of we know how we are aggregate, but it's important to also hone in on specific groups. So I think we're aligned.
Ms. Ortega, I just want to make sure we answered that question. But was that what you were looking for? Or
Yeah, yes.
I was thinking of a different direction, but if my colleagues answered, that's great.
Yeah, that's what I was interested in. I think the just sort of thinking about CalPERS as an employer of choice and wanting to look at what makes it an attractive place to work. I feel like historically, the focus is always on just comparing salaries to other public pension funds. And it seems to me there are lots of other reasons why people want to come to an organization or stay in an organization. And I'm not sure that we do as good a job at measuring or comparing some of those kinds of factors.
Yeah, mission. Yeah, I was just going to say, mission and, purpose and culture really become critical. And especially if you're in a public sector space where you may not be able to fully compete with the private sector on compensation, it becomes even more critical.
Yeah, Ms. Ortega, one last comment, not to belabor the point. We do an interesting piece of research every year called Talent Trends, and we present that to a group of HR public professionals of HR public pension plans, and we'd be happy to share that with you. What that research has found that the purpose in the organization is paramount in terms of that engagement. Like you said, compensation is a piece of it, but developing that relationship with your employees and really having that sense of purpose is critical. We'll be happy to send that along.
As a side note, the employee deal with COVID is changing, right? So all of us are remote right now. We think that's going to have a major impact when you look at employee satisfaction or engagement surveys and how we manage that.
Very good. Thank you. Seeing no other questions, that ends our interview. We thank you for your time and your presentation today. And we're going to move forward with our process. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having
us.
Thank you. Great
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
You too. Okay, subcommittee. So we're now to the point that the interviews are over. We can start looking at points, etc. But are there any questions from the subcommittee or from non-subcommittee members that want to ask any questions before we move forward? Again, remember, only the subcommittee votes. Right, Ms. Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I understand the performance and incentive process and how those scores are added.
Okay, Ms. Tucker? You're muted for some reason.
Thank you, Ms. Middleton. Are you referring to our overall performance and incentive programs, or are there specific responses?
I'm looking at the page 204 in our handout that has a performance or incentive score that it appears that 3 of the 5 contenders have an opportunity to have added to their score.
Thank you. So a few of the members have additional preference and incentive points for either diversity and inclusion goals or small business goals.
All right. One of them is up to 100. The other is at a standard 60 that is being added to those scores.
That's correct, Ms. Middleton. It is 60 points for use of DVBE vendors or firms, and it is up to 100 points if they are a certified small business.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have a question for you, either for Michelle or for Doug. I really like the presentation from Global Governance Advisors, but I really dislike their fee structure. Is there any way that you can work with them on that as we move forward? It's almost like they price themselves out.
Yeah, so all of the firms, go ahead.
Please proceed, Michelle. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So all of the firms, once we make a final selection, we can discuss with them the prices. They put the maximum possible fee in their proposal, but based on the specifics, it could be a bit lower.
Okay. Ms. Oliveros had to step away for a second, so we're not going to rush things.
Okay. I have another question following up on
Please do.
their hourly fee is one factor, but do we have any ability to assess how many hours a firm is going to do or take to do a particular job or assignment? Someone may charge more per hour, but if they get it done in half the time, they're actually a far more valuable firm. But I don't see anything in our process that gives us any ability to assess how efficiently a firm performs.
I would say that, Ms. Middleton, thank you for that question, that we can estimate the hours that a specific task would take and then work with them to sort of program those hours. And we can agree on maximum hours for a particular task. So when we set a task to them, we can perhaps agree on a range with a maximum.
Yeah, I think that would be important.
Okay, further discussion from the committee, or are you ready to start assigning positions? What's the pleasure?
I'd like to get into assigning positions.
Okay, go for it.
I had one firm that I thought was head and shoulders above everyone else, and that was Global Governance Advisors. And I recognize that their hourly rate was the highest, but no one came across with the depth of understanding of pension fund issues, in my mind, in comparison to global governance. And I think as we move forward, it is with reference to various pension funds that we need to be measuring ourselves.
I, for one, agree with you. I think they were head above others with their presentation. But like you heard me say earlier, my trepidation was with the fees. So if there's any way we can work on that going forward, that's certainly something I would like to entertain. Ms. Ortega, Ms. Oliveros, what's your concept?
I thought GGA had a strong presentation, strong proposal. I think their experience is pretty narrow, which can be helpful in terms of being able to assess peer relationships. I actually thought Grant Thornton had broader experience and a lot more depth when it came to their knowledge of investment executives and compensation. So those are my top two. For me, it's not that one is head and shoulders above the rest.
Okay. Ms. Ortega?
You know, I'll say that there are the three that stand out are the top technical scores, and I think they have very different pros and cons in my mind. So I agree with Ms. Oliveros' comments about Grant Thornton, but at the same time, I haven't been as impressed with what we've received from them most recently. So I feel like that's a bit of a negative. And then I don't think Mercer presented as well as GGA in today's meeting, but I think they have really a lot of interesting things to bring to kind of the broader discussion about talent management and the types of things you want for an organization more broadly than just compensation. So I do think they have more resources to bring to the committee beyond compensation. I think that GGA definitely sort of narrowed in on some of the key decisions that we tend to be considering in front of the in the committee around compensation incentive structure. I might, just based on my own bias towards that broader view of employment issues, I might lean a little more towards Mercer for that reason. But I'd be willing to consider where other folks have stronger feelings about a particular firm.
I also want to say I've worked with Mercer directly on ESG for the entire insurance industry and divestiture related to stranded asset risk. The depth of their knowledge there is phenomenal. And so if we're looking at some point at tying risk to compensation, especially if we start to look more at ESG, they have some interesting knowledge there too. It doesn't mean that we can't have a separate contract at some other point though.
Very good. So we have a range of 0 to 1,200 points to assign to each of the candidates. Does somebody want to take a shot at, let's just go down at the way we interviewed them and see if we can assign points. So for DEC, what is the pleasure? Does somebody have a recommendation they'd like to make?
750.
750? Okay. Any discussion on that?
I thought theirs was the weakest of the presentations that we saw.
Agreed. Okay, the next one is Gallagher. What kind of points are we thinking for that? Anyone?
850.
850?
I agree.
Okay. Next is GGA.
I had them at 1,100.
1,100. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
I had them at 1,000.
Okay, 1,100 and 1,000.
I would lean more towards the 1,000.
You would lean more towards 1,000, okay. Can we break it in the middle at 1050?
Sure.
All right.
Okay. Grant Thornton.
I also had them at 1,000.
And I had them closer to 900.
Yeah, I would probably put them closer to the 900 range myself as well. Ms. Ortega, any comments?
I would probably go closer to the 900 as well.
Okay. And last is Mercer.
Uh, 950.
950. Comments?
I had them at 850.
850. Okay. Ms. Ortega?
I would put them closer to the 950, just thinking about Grant Thornton being at 900. I would have gone higher with Mercer, so.
Okay. So just some preliminary discussion. I have DEC at 750, Gallagher at 850, GGA at 1050, Grant Thornton at 900, and Mercer, there's discussion between 950 and 850. Ms. Ortega said higher than Grant Thornton, so 925, would that work for folks?
Yeah.
Okay. So if somebody wants to put that in the form of a motion, we can then turn that over to Ms. Tucker.
So move.
Is there a second?
A second.
So it's moved and seconded that we place DEC at 750, Gallagher at 850, GGA at 1050, Grant Thornton at 900, and Mercer at 925. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Ms. Hopper, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa Middleton.
Aye.
Stacey Oliveris.
Aye.
Irena Ortega.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, we have Lisa Middleton making the motion, Stacey Oliveris second it, and all ayes.
Very good. Thank you very much. So at this point, we're going to let staff start working on the calculations. We're going to take a 30-minute break. We will reconvene at 1 o'clock. Thank you. Ms. Tuck, is there anything else you need before we go forward?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you very much.
Very good, thank you. We'll see you at 1 o'clock, everyone.
Thank you.